All right, we guys are recording our session. Thank you for joining today, the session number 19th. It's anonymous mock interviews with the hiring managers. And in a minute, I will introduce our managers. So let me share my screen again. And yeah, so today will be mock interviews for software engineers, right? And who are our managers today? Well, I want to introduce Vinoj. He is an engineering manager at company FloQast. And Vinoj, he was participating all in the, almost all of them, all our mock interview sessions. Thank you for doing this, providing amazing feedback, very helpful feedback to our candidates. So our candidates could improve their interviewing skills. Thank you, Vinoj. And the second hiring manager is Sanjay. Sanjay Prajapati. He is a director of engineering at company Bluemark. He will join a little bit later, maybe in 30 minutes. But yeah, that's our today's hiring managers. So quick disclaimer, today is an educational event, and all of us, we represent only us. We do not represent company's opinion. We do not represent companies. Uh, Basically, all what we're saying is just only our opinion. And yeah, don't. So it's not a job opportunity. That's what I want to say. All right. And like if you guys haven't been in our previous mock interviews, you're probably not really sure how it works. So we have three anonymous candidates today, and all of them they will be they has to prepare only two questions basically. The first question will be tell me about yourself, and the second question would be what did you do at your last project. Basically, we want to hear your experience related to software engineering. And after that, so these two questions will be limited with 4 minutes, and I will be keep tracking the time. And after that, Vinoj and Sanjay will have a possibility to ask a follow-up question. So the same way how they do in their real interviews in their companies. And after that, that's the most important, I think, is that Vinod and Sanjay, they will give the feedback. What went well and what should be improved. I think this is the most critical part, and I think that's why most of our candidates came for, right, to hear what they do good or not really good. Um, so if you guys the first time here, actually, I want to know that. Could you please hit the plus sign? Who is the very first time here? All right, I see. Awesome, awesome. We have several people who is the first. Nice. Okay, so if you guys who's the first time and you want to do the same thing, you want to get the feedback, what you can do is to register in our website, just to fill out the simple form, and our volunteers and Irina will reach you out and assign you to the next sessions. So you'll be joining to our Slack channel, and you have to go through the onboarding process as well. Onboarding session, it's very simple. We just go through the logistic processes. Um, and also want to say that we do not filtering our candidates as long as we see that they brought their real resumes with their real experience. And if it's horrible, that's okay. That's why you're here. We can give you feedback. Then you can improve your resume. And if you sucks in the interview, that's okay too. That's why you come here. and we'll give you the feedback as well. And then you can improve, obviously, right? All right, guys. So that's pretty much it. I think we can start with the candidate number one. If you guys have any questions, you can ask this question in our Q&A Q&A tab or in the chat as well. After our session, if you have more questions, please welcome, as I said, join to our Slack channel so you can post there your questions and you can do networking. But be mindful that in this Slack channel, not only candidates, but also hiring managers. Just keep this in mind too. Okay. We have candidate number one. Let me give you ability to share your screen. Candidate number one. Hi, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Hi, everyone.
All right. Candidate number one, please, could you please share your screen so we can see your resume? And candidate number one, please tell us about yourself.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, perfect.
Excellent. So I'm candidate number one. I've been in the IT industry for over 20 years. I started my career as a QA engineer and later moved into development. My primary programming language is C#, so I use Microsoft technologies on a daily basis. I'm considering myself a full stack developer, although most of the time I spend in the backend. Currently looking for a new position where I could apply the knowledge I've accumulated as well as continue improving myself. For the last 5 years, I've been working for a healthcare company. I'm a part of a small team of 4 developers. My responsibility is to support existing applications and create new to fulfill the company's needs. And it is up to me to collect the requirements, convert them into code, write the documentation, deliver applications to the customer, and provide support. Shall I describe my current project?
Yeah, sure, please.
So my current project is iInstruction. This is a desktop application that generates instructions for building highly customizable products. Based on the bill of materials, it creates a plain list of steps to be followed by the line workers while building the product. We inherited this project from another team without any documentation. The code structure was not the best, and it was quite difficult to add new functionality or update the existing one. So the entire code has to be refactored. As a result, the UI, business logic, database access logic went into separate layers. Also, overall logic has been revised. After refactoring, the startup and exit time have been significantly improved. And not only this functionality. I successfully added new features to meet the new requirements. Also, this tool uses as input some XML files. We call them suites. The suites had to be created manually by a dedicated group of engineers. And there were multiple complaints about this process as it was time consuming and required software developer skills. To cover these needs, I created another tool which would semi-automate creation of these suites. So the tool is already released and is really appreciated as it made the process much easier. So this is all about me and my current project at high level. If you need more details, please let me know.
Sure, Vinoj. Do you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, I've got to give you points for the same initials as me.
Sure.
So I saw your resume. I was like, he's a winner. I like this candidate.
Shall we stop here?
Well, I think we're done, man. I think we're good. Right.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for participating.
Have a good one. All right. It's super cool. One thing you mentioned at the top was like, hey, I'm looking for a new position with use my current knowledge and continue to grow. How do you currently look for opportunities to grow at at each of the places that you've worked?
Well, I'm trying to use latest technologies. If there's something to improve, I improve. Trying to improve my communication skills, trying to learn how to cooperate with other team members.
Awesome. And team member, and like, how would you quantify your own growth? Like, so for example, if you're like, hey, I want to get better at this, let's say, I think I saw somewhere on your resume, I saw Angular, right? How do you know that you're getting good enough or making a difference in how much you're growing? Is it, hey, this used to be hard before when I first looked at this project and now I'm able to do it easier? Or is there a way that it's impacting the code base itself that you look at on how your growth is continuing?
The less I Google,
love it.
the better probably I feel
I love it.
in the technology, and probably the fast I can deliver using a technology, and the less bugs can be found after the application is delivered, and the less unexpected issues,
side effects.
Yeah, and side effects come while developing a product.
Awesome. I take a lot of notes, so forgive me if I'm just like sitting here like bashing away at my keyboard. Great. So you on this current project, you said there's 4 devs, right? But you've got these responsibilities of taking the requirements from somebody. Is it like a product manager or project manager? Who are you getting the requirements from?
Well, this is a non-software company, and we don't have actually a project manager.
Okay.
So we have a manager, and it is up to him just to decide which direction we should go.
Got it.
And it is up to us to get the requirements. We just go to the production line, and talk to people. And
very cool. Very cool.
They explain their needs, and we check what could be improved by adding a new tool or automate some process.
Great. So then how do you, so like on the product line, somebody says, hey, I'd love if I could do this, right? How do you then map that into, how do you do that mental process of like this chunk of work, and we cut it into small pieces that are technically viable, maybe something that's better code? What are all the things that you're doing when you're cutting it up into small pieces like that?
So once we have an understanding of what is required to be done, we talk to our manager. Our manager decides whether this product is the priority of this product, and when should we start working on this product. Actually, before doing that, we provide a raw estimate. Sometimes we create a pilot application just to demo that the requested functionality can be implemented. Yep. And based on this, we start development. So we do Scrum.
Right, I can tell. Yeah.
And we deliver like once in 2 weeks we show
Kind
our
of a release or a product.
yeah,
Yeah.
a release. Yeah, so we demo what we have done in the last 2 weeks to our customer.
Really
And
cool.
then we can discuss this. And again, sometimes they can change their mind and add
Yeah.
new functionality or remove something.
Yeah, I mean, they're customers. That's why we're doing this, right? To kind of get their feedback.
Yes.
Okay. One more I had was, so you said the code base in this desktop application was inherited from other devs,
Yeah.
right? And you had to refactor it. What are the reasons where you're like, I gotta, A, why do you have to refactor? Is it working? And B, when you are doing a refactor, what are the things that are going on in your mind that if it's like this today, I want to make it better by X in the future?
So probably the first sign when an application has to be refactored is when it is hard to maintain it. It is hard to add new features or fix existing bugs. What was wrong with this application? There was a mixture of different logic everywhere. So, for example, you could see some database access code in the UI layer near the logic, which actually should be the UI logic, and and so on. So ideally, the logic of an application has to be separated into layers. It has to be separated into layers which know as less as possible about each other. They should be independent,
and as
much as possible.
And where did you learn that paradigm that you're talking about? Like, how did you come to this? Like, hey, this is the right way we want to do things.
Well, probably it hasn't happened in one day.
What? That wasn't yesterday?
So it's just coming from my experience.
Just from a virtue of being in the industry for a while, right?
Yeah. So sometimes if a team is bigger, for example, we have it could be that there is a dedicated team of UI developers, so they should be able to work on the UI side of the application without interacting much with other developers who are focused more on the back end. And it is good to have this separation because changes in one layer should not affect logic of other layers.
Okay, I have maybe one last question about this area. So as you're doing this refactor, how does testing play into this? What is your test strategy?
Well, in some projects, we do have unit tests that helps us to run fast, pretty fast. It helps us checking if nothing is broken while we're moving some code from one part into a different, from one class, for example, into a different class or something like this. In this case, we didn't have any tests created by the previous team, so we just tested by like we just manually tested everything we done. No automation tests.
Great. Okay. Evgeny, just out of curiosity, how much more time do we have? Just want to be cognizant of that.
We have 5 more minutes.
Okay, great. And so if you're manually testing, so even the manual test, there's a bunch of use cases, right? You want to test that this works and this works and this works, right? Over time, those test cases are going to, I presume, just continue to increase, right? So what are some ways that you would see to try to scale that out as you keep writing more code and refactor this app?
So if the application, if the code is structured correctly, changes in one functionality should not affect a different functionality. So if you are done with one functionality, you are no longer touching those. Ideally, you should no longer be touching those classes, and that logic should not be broken. So
how would you know that? How would you verify that? Yeah.
So let's say I'm done with functionality A. I run all the tests, all the possible tests to make sure that there are no bugs on that part of the application, and then I'm just moving on to the next part.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, probably unit tests would help in this case more, but well, sometimes these tests have to be approved by the customer, and this would require extra time.
Really?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, sometimes it is hard to convince customer that creating unit tests is a good idea, because what customer sees is that adding additional tests means additional effort, which means additional cost, yes, for customer. Yeah. And sometimes customer accepts that risk, and he's ready to invest more money in testing the application once everything is completed, rather than having developers to create unit tests while working on the application.
Got it. You said that after the refactoring, the startup and exit time improved. Is that right?
Yes. So there was a complaint from our end users, because sometimes when it would take like 15 to 20 seconds for the application to start up, and they would click twice or even 3 times on the startup shortcut to start the application, and it would start several times. The startup of the application has improved, and also we added a splash screen, which is shown immediately when almost immediately after the shortcut of the application is clicked. So user now is notified that the application is starting, and he has just to wait for another couple of seconds.
And what do you attribute that startup speeding up? Like, there's the perception of speed, right? Which is, so if we initially are starting up an application and we're going to wait until everything's loaded and you're good to go, and then you saw the splash screen, then that's one thing. But if you just say, hey, I'm not going to wait for everything to load, I'm going to put the splash screen right up front, the perception is like, hey, I guess we're good to go, right? What would you attribute the actual startup speed increasing? Where would you say, what key thing helped it go faster on the app?
So we improved the logic of the startup, and we just increased the speed of initialization of some of the logic. We did not eliminate any, we did not introduce any lazy loading logic. We just improved whatever was there.
Got it. And in terms of like a before and after, was it just like, hey, I can test it locally and I can just tell that it's faster, or were there like some quantifiable metrics that you were looking to get better by?
We did these tests on our development machines and also on the client's machines, before and after. So we just we tried to run side by side the older version of the application and the new one.
Great. You mentioned that there's, I think I have 1 more minute. So you mentioned that there's like 4 other devs on your project, or 3 other devs on your project. Is that right?
They are on my team, but
on your
not
team.
not on this project. The way everything is organized in this company is everyone is responsible for one project. Sometimes, but
Oh, I see.
it is very rarely when more than one developer is assigned to one project.
I understand. Okay. Then maybe to come back to the customer part, then, is there a time where you've asked or a customer said something and you had to be like, that is just going to take forever. I don't like, or like, they asked something that just wasn't reasonable. How did you handle that?
Well, first of all, I'm in such cases, I try to understand what is the needs. What is the need of that functionality? If sometimes I can suggest an alternative way of getting exactly the same result. If there is no other way, then I check how complicated it would be to implement such a functionality. And if it is time consuming or requires a lot of effort, then I may suggest in such case, again, another an alternative functionality which would do exactly the same.
Right. Basically solve their problem in a different way.
In a different way, yes.
Awesome. Well, cool. That's all the questions I had.
Thank you.
All right, Vinoj, let's move with the feedback then.
Great. So I really liked talking through this project with you because I could see the end to end of it. And that's really important in any interview so that someone understands and groks your story, right? How you were, like, what is the impact that you did and how, what difference did you make? Now, in this case, you are the only dev on this project and you are directly interacting with the customer. So like the impact is super high because you're directly dealing there, right? Sometimes with some companies and some sort of setups, it's not always that way. So that I liked. I liked the sort of, you talked about the abstraction of logic into the various layers, right? And to your point, as you said, like I've been doing this for a while, so I've picked this up, right? If there's some critical feedback or something I would improve, it would be like, I know you mentioned I'd love to learn more. I would love to have heard like, and this is how I'm currently learning, right? I do this to learn. I read these books or something like that, just to show that that's how you're also continuing to upskill yourself. Another thing was that your resume at first was a little hard for me to read. And resume-wise, what I'm looking for, just for some context, is I'm very quickly scanning, right? Because I'm getting hundreds of resumes. So the best thing is like, what is this story that you just told me? I'd love to see that bumped up. Because I immediately actually almost ignore the summary and go straight to professional experience. That story, if you can bump it up a little bit, that'd be super helpful.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, candidate number one.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to increase my skills.
Absolutely. We'll be in touch with you anyway. All right. Do we have candidate number two ready? And Brian said, great job. Yes, candidate number one, great job. Let me, candidate number one, can you stop sharing your screen? And let's move.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Hi, candidate number two.
Hi, I can share my screen.
Yes, please.
Okay, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, perfect. We can see your screen. And please, candidate number one, if you're ready, please, number two, please tell us about yourself.
Yeah, of course. I am candidate number two, and I'm currently working as a software engineer in a startup in New York City. So I have been working for the company for almost 2 years. So this company is drug discovery company that utilize machine learning and AI to look for treatments in disease. So as a software engineer in the company, my responsibility was mostly around design and build the software orchestration systems to run machine learning models, and also triage the outcome from machine learning models. So for instance, for the last year, I was working on a project that is to redesign and rebuild an orchestration systems that runs machine learning models. The reason that we wanted to redesign the system was because the older system was pretty unreliable, and it took us like few days, even few weeks to complete one machine learning model run. So it was so the performance was not very good. So that's why we decided to redesign and rebuild the system. So we decouple the systems into different phases. We have one phase to train the model, and then we have one phase to promote the machine learning model. Basically, we select the best model that we think, and then promote it to the next stage. The next stage, it is also maintained by us, called inference. Basically, we needed to so basically we developed some APIs to serve the machine learning model outcomes. So yeah, I really enjoyed it working on that project because I learned a lot, and we spent 6 months to work on that project. The outcome was pretty awesome. So because we have the pre-trained phase, so we reduce the production runtime from days to a few minutes. Yeah, so I would say I was pretty happy about the system that we redesigned, and also the outcome from redesigning the orchestration system. Let me know if you want me go into the details.
Absolutely, please.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so okay, so I can talk about the tech stack that I used for redesign this orchestration system. Well, so it's a little bit complicated. Okay, so we actually use Airflow to train the model. So and we use like the NoSQL, which is MongoDB, to serve the model artifacts that are during the training period. And for the promote part, is kind of simple. We use gRPC we use gRPC for our API framework to promote our machine learning models, and also to serve the machine learning predictions. And also we also, the whole project was deployed into Kubernetes cluster, because yeah, that is the cluster that we are using in the company, and yeah, we use AWS to host the whole cluster. Yeah, so specifically, my responsibility in this project is to in the meeting to discuss the new system design at the beginning, and then I worked with one machine learning engineer to develop the APIs for training the model, and a promote model, and also inference model. And in the end, at the meantime, we also spend a lot of time writing the unit test, and also smoke test, integration test, just make sure we have more confidence whenever we want to update the code base, or we want to add the new functionalities into our code base. Yeah.
I think we'll stop there.
Yeah. I feel like I'm just like throwing a lot.
All good. No worries at all. No worries at all. Um, great. So one thing I think I missed is I missed the business problem here. I know that we're talking a lot about the technical details, but what is the what is this? What are the AI models being used for?
Yeah. So yeah, sorry about that. So the company is to look for the treatments in disease, and we assume
Tumors?
that
Is that what you said?
treatment for disease. So as I said, we are looking for drugs to cure disease, and for the machine learning, and we assume that in human body, one gene will cause one disease. So yeah, and for the machine learning model, the responsibility of machine learning model is to look for that gene who caused the disease.
Oh, super cool.
Yeah. So
if I'm at likelihood for, I don't know, diabetes, right? It'll give me with some measure accuracy that, hey man, you should probably go see a doctor, right? And stop eating or drinking so much soda. Okay.
Yeah.
Something like that. Okay.
Yeah, exactly not that super cool. But so the machine learning model will, so there is probably like there's only a fixed number of genes in human body. So we can assign scores. So doing a lot of like training, doing a lot of like a machine learning model strategy, and then like in the end, the machine learning model will assign scores to all the genes in human body, and then we would rank all the genes based on the score that.
So let me, because I definitely did not go to medical school. So wait, actually, did you learn all this like stuff about the genetics and stuff at the job, or did you know this before?
I don't know this before. I just I've been working for the company for almost 2 years, so I just talked to my
coworkers. Okay, so it's just become like, that's pretty awesome. That's awesome. Okay, great. So so there's certain scores, relative scores assigned to these genes. We need to also then, if I'm understanding the job correctly, you need to make sure that the predictability of those rates are, accurate. You said it was really slow at first, and then over time, this orchestration system came in and got a lot faster. Why was it so slow at first?
Yeah, that's definitely a good question. So at the beginning, or before I joined, in the team, there was no software engineer. Most of them are machine learning engineer and AI scientists. So what they focus is not really the software, not really the system, not really the orchestration.
Right.
Instead of just pure machine learning algorithm. So so a lot of times the people outside of the team don't really know how to run the system and how to, if there's a problem, and the people outside the team don't know how to fix it. And if there's a problem, the people needed to ask the engineers, the AI scientists and the machine learning engineers in the team. In the team, the engineers also, their main focus is now to maintain the system, is to build machine learning model itself. So
totally different skill set, right? Yeah. But so I understand the people problem, which is like, hey, this is not what I do. I'm not a software engineer, and I'm being asked to do this thing. I totally get it. But what specifically about the code and the way that it was actually built was causing that slowness? I'm still not catching.
Yeah, I would say that the code base was very well. So before we redesign the system, we do everything in Airflow. So we do, we actually don't even store like model artifacts in the database. We store the model artifacts in a file in S3. So I would say everything is convoluted. It's not a decoupled system. So whenever there's a bug failed, it will it will, how do you describe that? If one thing failed, it will
it's just cascading failure,
parts.
right?
Yes, that's right. So it's really hard to maintain. And yeah, at the meantime, like the team don't really focus on the system part. So yeah, so in the team just run the system as long as it's as long as like one machine learning model run is done. We don't care about the maintainability of the system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. This is me being a slow typer.
Yeah.
So we'll just
Yeah.
we'll just handle that. Just me being a slow typer. Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I heard about this Kubernetes cluster, which is super cool. And there's I'm hearing about S3 here, and also Mongo. Can you walk me through what parts are being stored in S3 versus Mongo, and how the data flows in, and also there's an API you had mentioned. I almost wish we had like a diagram, like a system diagram, so I could like, but I'm trying to like build it in my head, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so like, so maybe let's start on that API. What's hitting that API?
Well, sorry, can you say the question?
Yeah, absolutely. Again? I said, what's hitting that API?
Okay, I see. So, yeah, so sorry for that. So, well, let's start with the three main API that we have. So we have the API for training the model. We have the API for promote the model, and then we have the API to serve the model prediction. So we have three big API here.
What was the second one? The training the model, the serve the model, or serve the prediction. What was the second one?
So the second one is promote model. So when we say promote, is we probably would train the model a lot of times, and we would get a different model weights each time. And well, the weights are different, and we want to select the best. So we don't always like want to promote the model whenever we train.
Yeah, of course, if it's garbage.
So yeah, I think that's why it's probably I couldn't find a better term to describe this.
No, that totally works.
Promote. Okay. Okay, so what are hitting the model? Okay, so the API. So for the training, the API, it is the people who want to train the model. So it's usually the people in the team. So the people outside of the team are now responsible for train the model. So yeah, for the promote API. So promote API, it is also managed by the team. So most are software developers, AI scientists, and a machine learning engineer. And the only API that we have external users are actually the inference API, which the API that serves machine learning model predictions. So it is also it's also the people who are also like AI scientists, machine learning engineer, and also drug discoverer. And yeah, I forgot one part is our downstream, which is our downstream, which is a platform that which is a platform that unified all the products within the department, and they have the UI. They have the UI to, for instance, create a button and it lets the user click button to retrieve the machine learning prediction. And for that button, it actually will call our inference API. I hope that's clear. Let me know if it's still confusing.
No, all good. It's helpful. Evgeny?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that Sanjay just joined, and he's.
Hey, Sanjay.
Hey, Vinoj, how are you?
Good.
All right.
So I know that Sanjay is the Python guy, so you may please join to our conversation, and if you have any questions, please go for it.
Sure. No, I'm enjoying the conversation with candidate and Vinoj.
Do you have any follow-ups, Sanjay? You wanted to ask?
No. Keep going.
Awesome. Where was I? Oh, so this was a question I had, candidate. So you talked about Kubernetes, and there's this cluster. Were you involved in setting that up, or was that already there? Was there like a DevOps team? How did that work?
Yeah, so I'm definitely not responsible to set up Kubernetes.
Okay.
So yeah, that's SRE team who are
Okay.
managing those. But I need to set up the CI/CD to run the pipeline. So in the pipeline, we will have like build the Docker image and then deploy the image into Kubernetes. And then we have in the CI/CD we have a bunch of tests: unit tests, integration tests, smoke tests, and then yeah, in the CI/CD, like we automate the deployment process.
And what did you use for CI/CD? What was the tool there?
Oh, we used GitLab, and the GitLab has CI/CD. And in the GitLab, it has like a YAML file, which it has a fixed template that you can build the CI/CD.
Configure it. Yeah, very nice.
That's
and
right.
and maybe walk me through a little bit of the what's the word I'm looking for? The I don't want to say code deploy process, but kind of, right? Like I make a branch, I do a thing, and then does it immediately kick off a build, or how did you do it?
Yeah, of course. Well, again, so it's the developers who write the YAML file for the CI/CD to deploy into the cluster. So I think yeah, I was working for 2 different teams, so the process a little bit different. But overall, we have different environments for sorry, we have different environments so we have one cluster for prod, we have one cluster for stage, and then we have one cluster for dev. For one project, we usually only have one instance deployed in prod and the stage. But in dev, it's kind of a different. For the team that I was working for last year, we actually have different deployments for each branch in dev cluster.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yes. I think the reason that we want to have different deployment instance for each branch in dev, because overall it was a relatively big code base, and it's the integration test takes like takes minimum an hour to finish.
Yeah, it probably takes some time. Yeah.
So yeah, before you finish your branch, you needed to do a lot of testing. It actually take a lot of time. So that's why we decided to, in order to not interrupt other people's development. So we decided to have one deployment instance for each branch. Yeah, but it's kind of different for the team that I am currently working on, just because the code base is relatively small, and the pipeline takes like 10 minutes to finish, and the deployment takes under 10 minutes. So everything is super quick. So in my current team, we only have one dev deployment instance for the whole team.
Great.
Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's all the questions I had.
Sanjay, do you have any questions so far?
Yeah. Actually, follow up to the CI/CD process. Do you have any automation process for your test suites?
Do I have any automation for CI/CD?
No, testing automation.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So yeah, of course. For the testing, so we don't use any specific testing framework, but since we use Python, so we use PyTest to run unit test, integration test, and the smoke test. And we would write scripts for those tests, and then we would call those tests in CI/CD. So whenever there's a pipeline, the pipeline will trigger those testing scripts automatically.
Got it. And that is part of the CI/CD built in GitLab, right?
Yeah, that is right.
Okay. Is there any criteria that you set for test coverage?
Yeah, so we are currently working on the test coverage. I think for the team, the test coverage should be about 95%. So yeah, so we I think we have like specific for what kind of test we want to write. So instead of just like the test coverage for functions we have in the code base, but instead we scope out like the behavior we expect from the code base. And we have like happy pass and unhappy pass. And then we scope everything out, and then we based on different categories or criteria that we come out, we look at how much tests we already have, and what other tests we still needed to add into the code base.
Got it. And you mentioned that you weren't involved in the architecture of the whole product. If you are the in charge, what are some of the things that you change and why?
Okay, so I'm actually not in charge. I think it's a startup, so probably the role are not very hierarchy. So like we respect each other, so we consider like we are all coworkers. Now actually like there's a person who in charge, but yeah, I think my role my role in the project mostly, well, I am a software engineer, and whenever I have ideas on, for instance, like adding new features or sort of like adding a specific test in the code base, I usually just would propose my ideas to get approval, to get opinions from everyone in the team, and then I will see if other people would be interested, and then we can like work together. If no one interested except for me, and the people agree on my proposal, I would just do it myself. I don't know if that's what you ask for.
No, I mean, that is future, right? What I ask for is, let's say you are building this product from scratch. Is there anything that you would like to change in the architecture? How you store the data, where you store the data? Is there anything that you would like to change, or you are pretty happy with the architecture? That's what I meant to ask.
Okay, I see. Well, if I if I am allowed to build a system from scratch, I would say I definitely would build something different than the current system. Well, I think it's definitely a hard question. So if one thing that I can do differently than the current system that we have is, I would say, let me see. I mean, I think this is definitely a question, because like I'm actually pretty happy that the system we have right now, because I think I spent the last 2 years on like redesign and refactoring, and I like whenever I have new ideas, I always propose my ideas and try to get my ideas approved. So I would say the systems that I have been involved have probably like 60% or 40% of my ideas. So I would definitely say that if I have the chance to start a new system from scratch right now, I definitely would do something different. But just as the current system that we have and that is being redesigned, it's probably hard for me to give a concrete idea of like what I can change if I give the opportunity to start the system from scratch.
Okay. I think those are my questions as well.
Maybe we need some clarification about 95% of testing coverage. Candidate number 2, can you tell us like a little bit more, like how do you know that you have covered 95%? And I know that's quite a challenging, to be honest.
It is. Yeah. So I think the 90 test coverage 95% is definitely a vague term. I would say so in the PI test, it actually would give you I kind of forgot the syntax, but I think there is a API that you can call in PyTest would give you the test coverage based on the project that you are given. But I don't think that number it's a reliable is a very reliable number because it purely it only purely covers the code that you have in the code base. However, so we are working on like scoping out the expected behavior in the code base and the happy pass, unhappy pass. So I think for those, we actually needed to do some menu menu validation. So for instance, we probably come up about 20 expected behavior in the code base. Well, so far we have now come up a way to automatically to determine how much expected behavior we covered in the code base. So yeah, for this part, we actually need to do a menu checkup for the expected behavior that we included in the code base.
All right. Okay, thank you, candidate number 2. Vinoj, Sanjay, do you want to go with
some feedback?
Yep.
Yeah, sure. So candidate, I would say like one of the things I really enjoyed was like how passionate you are about this. Like it was clear that this isn't just a job, like this is like you're in it, right? And I love that like at any point you're like, oh right, we didn't talk about that. Let's go into this, and let's go into this, and let's go into this. It was super cool. I love your enthusiasm for it. Super fun to. It just makes like our job easier, you know, just by having a person who's like really into it. So that was cool. And not to say you should fake it, but if you are into it, just do it. And then like I also liked that like the level of detail that you were able to provide on the questions that we asked was really clear. On the things I think could do better is shortening your answers, right? So what ends up happening is, as a default, I try to do like 20 seconds or less per answer. And the benefit of doing that is that it becomes a conversation, right? By just being like, hey, what'd you have for lunch? Oh, I had a burger. It was all right. Wait, why was it all right? Right? Now we're talking, right? But the longer the answer gets, now it's a monologue and it's less of a conversation, right? So you can just make it a conversation. We can just have fun joking around on this cool project you worked on by just shortening it to like a 20, 30 second. And then if the person's like, wait, I don't understand the Kubernetes part. Can we talk about that for a second? Then you can go into the detail. So that would be some feedback I'd give.
Yeah, I agree with Vinoj is you have conversation and one thing that I would say, you are into it, you know everything, every single details. Try not to, extend your detail from the get-go. It's just let the person get excited, right? You say a sentence, let the interviewer get excited and let him ask you the information that you already have, and drive your conversation towards what information you have. One thing that I would say is if you have a more like interviewer have less chance to ask you question, you are stretching your answers, that means you're probably losing interest from the other party. Another point that I wanted to point out is don't just answer just for the sake of you have to answer the question. If you, for example, I'm going to go back to my questions that I asked about the architecture. If you are happy with the current architecture, you just say, oh, I'm happy with the current architecture, that there's nothing to change. And that stopped the conversation right there. But overall, I think you have the energy, you had pretty much all the information, to be honest, about this role and your resume and product. So good job.
Thank you so much. I think those feedback are super useful. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate number 2. I think if you are in the job search, in the job market right now, you'll get hired pretty quick.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the same thing to candidate number 1 too. Okay, let's move forward with the candidate number 3.
How about me, Evgeny? Will I get hired pretty quick? Did you?
I'm not sure about you, Vinoj, to be honest.
I don't trust you. I don't trust this guy.
We actually may do also mock interviews with anonymous managers,
That's awesome.
And yeah, but unfortunately, I think most of our people already can recognize your voice, so it's not going to be anonymous. All right, candidate number 3, how are you? Are you ready with it?
I'm doing well, guys, and I am ready to get started whenever you guys would like me to share my screen.
Sure, please. You can share your screen right now. Awesome. All right, candidate number 3, please tell us about yourself.
Hi, so my name is Christopher DeMaye. I'm a software engineer out of Houston, Texas, and I've recently started my career in looking for opportunities in the industry. Just to give you a little bit of background, my father was a software engineer, so all throughout my household, I've always been exposed to technology. I've always loved technology, and as I got in high school, I had the opportunity to take some programming courses and learn that my love of technology and this opportunity to help people with code was really my passion. So coming out of high school now, I have recently graduated from a software engineering boot camp. Some of the primary languages that I've worked in are Ruby on Rails, React, and JavaScript on the front end, and recently have started learning Node.js by building some side projects, developing my portfolio, and I'm also taking some JavaScript data structure courses from Princeton online. So yeah, that's basically my background. And how would you guys like to hear about one of my projects on my resume here?
Yeah, all right.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So one of the projects that I developed is actually the capstone project for my boot camp. Was a project that I based off of my father's application. He does DOA approval at his company. So basically, people in a organization would want to develop projects. So they submit these projects and they have to get approved by their supervisors based on the dollar amount for these applications. So what the project ended up being was a workflow application developed in Ruby on Rails with the React front end. And basically users would be able to submit projects and based on the dollar amount, once the project was submitted, it would tell them which of their supervisors would need to approve the project. It would then notify those supervisors. They'd be able to access details of the project. And once they approved it, it would send a notification both to the creator of the project who submitted it and the next person in line to approve the application, approve the project, I apologize. And basically the scope of the project was I wanted to redevelop his application in this software stack and see how I could improve different efficiencies on it and basically develop a, a project in the, in the view of, in the mindset of what his application developed. And, some of the complications I came across in this project, I developed it in TypeScript on the front end. So, TypeScript was, a good language to learn. and definitely added some type safety and development experience on the front end. And I developed it in React. It was a single page application, and the backend was built with Ruby on Rails, actually utilizing Postgres. So one thing I wanted to mention also was I was the sole developer on this project. It was developed in 3 weeks. And the goal of the project was basically, like I said, to give a user interface where people could submit projects and then have their supervisors approve them. So the project ended up actually being deployed to Heroku. It was deployed to Heroku using a GitHub Actions pipeline. So basically, when a developer would submit the code to the production branch and merge that branch, it would basically run some of the unit tests that I had in the GitHub Actions environment. If those tests pass, it would push the Ruby on Rails project to Heroku via their CI and their command line interface. And then it would actually also make sure that that deployment was successful. And then if it was, it would migrate the database over to the next database migration, if that was the case with the Ruby on Rails project. And basically that allowed me to later on in the project have a much faster development experience in deploying that application. Some of the other tools that I utilized when building the application was in refactoring it later, I've developed some Cypress tests to for end-to-end to basically test the front end to make sure that the user experience and the overall user flow of the application of creating projects and submitting them works, in that if as I'm refactoring the code base and making changes to basically build on and add features, that the the project still stays overall stable and the user experience doesn't degrade. Yeah, so that's basically my project that I built. It was a workflow approval application, and I'd love to hear any follow-up questions that you guys have regarding that project or any other information on my resume or my experience.
Sure, please. Who want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. Can you tell me a little bit more about that React app? What are the ways that you sort of broke up your components? And let's just start there. What are the components on your page in the single page app?
Yeah, sure. So basically the components were basically I had a container that was the main of the application that would basically contain the router and also contain logic to make sure that the user was logged out. And then all the other pages were basically broken into an outer shell that would handle the data fetching, the data logic to make sure that the data was fetched down into the application. And then there would be a subcomponent that would represent displaying the data on each of the pages.
And so it sounds like there's a sort of a container system for the data fetching. And then is there only like one child component, or are there multiple child components?
Sure. So it depends on like the pages. So there's generally one major child component under the data fetcher. And then basically what I had is a tab component system. So you'd have a dashboard that would have multiple tabs on a page, like for a project, for example, that would have different pages of information on the project. So basically in that main child container, the data would basically then be passed into these tabs based on a structure, and then those tabs would then be able to be navigatable on that page for the user.
Got it. And so in that world, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah. So so it sounds like there's like basically 1 to 2 levels, and you're using prop drilling to go down the components. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically,
oh no, that was the only thing. And so then the state of the app, are you using anything for state management?
Yeah, so actually to do state management, I used a relatively newer package called React Query. And basically what it lets you do is it adds a caching layer for all your data requests in the application. So what it actually lets you do is make your request and access, for example, the user data. Who is the user that you received from the request to authenticate the user, and then actually allow you to use that data and reuse those data fetch hooks. And then basically when that fetch goes to happen in your React application, it basically access the cache. Instead of hitting the server, and allow you to share data between your components by basically relying on this global cache as your state management. Now, as far as where the user was in the application, it was mostly based on the React router and passing in state through the React router basically to what the project was, as well as the URL identifying what project the user was navigating to. And basically that state was passed with React router just to ensure that that the URL would navigate to the correct page.
Why use React Query when you have access to something like hooks or Redux?
Yeah, so
what was the decision there?
Yeah, so one of the benefits that I really liked about React Query is it had a very easy to use interface as far as side effects go with your data fetching, and basically it allowed me to really create these hooks that could be reused in a lot of different components without having to worry about necessarily overfetching data. And I also didn't have to necessarily worry about that the data was still valid, because React Query gives a very nice settings around refetching data, basically when components reload, when components are stored on the page, and that really made it really easy to build that valid data structure that was always kept up to date in the browser. And like I said, I was the only developer on this application, and I thought about building out a state management system in Redux, and I just thought that with the short time that I had to develop this application, that React Query gave a really nice data fetching experience to build out the state of the application.
Cool.
Cool. Can you walk through your information journey from backend to front end?
Yeah, sure. So basically, for example, like when the user submits a new project, the application basically using React Query and Axios would make a post request to the Ruby on Rails server. The Ruby on Rails server then basically validates that the user has a supervisor, the user has a authorization to submit that project in the organization, and then it basically goes through a workflow of reading the database and determining who that user supervisor is. It checks, if their assigned DOA dollar amount is enough for the application, and if it's not, it then moves forward and basically repeats this process of assigning the users to the workflow. And then once that approval workflow is created, the request then responds back to the front end, basically notifying them that the project is ready and that it has been created. And then the user interface basically would either then notify the user that the request failed and give a notification message for why their project passed or was able to be submitted for approval or not. And then if it was able to be submitted for approval, it would then navigate them to a page that would then start a new process, basically of fetching that new workflow from the database and then providing it to the front end, basically based off of if that previous data fetch submitting the project was successful or not.
Okay. Can you walk me through your authentication method that you use for the API?
Yeah, so I actually use a library for Ruby on Rails called Devise. It's a very popular open source application for authenticating users and storing their credentials in a SQL-based database using Active Record. And basically what I did was I developed a JWT-based authentication system that would send, after the user was able to validate themselves, would send a JWT token down to the client that was stored in a HTTPS same site secure cookie that would then allow the user on subsequent requests to authenticate themselves with the backend.
Okay, cool. Why did you choose PGSQL over any other data storage?
Yeah, so one thing that I really like about PostgreSQL is, some of the performance that it offers. It also integrates very well with Active Record. Another reason why I chose PostgreSQL is because with Heroku, they actually make it really easy to launch PostgreSQL databases along with your application. So part of that choice was just the ease of integration with Ruby on Rails, and part of that also was the ease of integration with the platform that I was choosing to host this portfolio project on.
Okay.
I had a question on the deployment part. Are these multiple repos, or is this one repo which has your Rails app and also your front-end React app?
Sure. So it's actually one repo that has both the React app and the Ruby on Rails app. Basically, how I managed that was through Yarn's package manager, and basically there's sub packages for each of the separate, like the front end and the back end application.
Yeah. Can you see maybe a potential issue in the future by doing it that way?
Yeah. So sure. So some of the benefits of having a mono repo are that your code base is very integrated in that it's all in the same development environment, and you can couple together some of your more of your build steps and your CI stuff. But some problems that could definitely arise out of that are if the code base becomes larger and possibly becomes unmanageable, or becomes another issue is sometimes package sizes can get very large and you can run into slower build steps. So depending on the project scale, there can definitely be project problems that I can see arising, especially out of using a primarily JavaScript application, also with the primarily Ruby application in the same mono repo.
Got it. And how many people are using this app? How many people end up actually using the workflow app?
Yeah, sure. So it ended up in scope actually mostly being a portfolio project for me to use to develop my skills for my project. Yeah. So but I am definitely interested in possibly in increasing the scale of the application.
What does that mean?
Sure. So one of the things that I've heard from people actually presenting this application and talking to people about is that in smaller scale organizations that people do have issues with project management, and that this type of application could suit that type of customer base. So
oh, I see. So you mean in terms of like customer usage, like start to increase scale by getting more. Got it.
Yeah. So one business problem that this could solve, like I said, is providing this type of approval application that was developed in large scale organizations for smaller companies to use, basically.
Cool.
Yeah. Is there any other questions you guys had for me?
Yeah. So beside this project, what other project you work on?
Sure. So one of the other projects that I developed was a Slack-like clone. Basically, they made the image of Slack that basically had the goal of using WebSockets and a Ruby on Rails backend to have live communication between one users and multiple users. That was also using React and Ruby on Rails. More recently, I've been working with Node.js, building some projects in Node.js, and I've recently built a clone of basically the Google interface with the goal of making it extremely responsive and making it mobile responsive, and basically learn some of the CSS around building out mobile applications and building web applications for mobile.
Okay. And you said mobile responsive. What is the main thing that you would do on CSS to make the application responsive?
Sure. So one of the things that I found really useful is a library called React Responsive that basically lets you write your media queries in React, and basically allows you to respond very and it responds in a very React. I guess one way to explain it is Reactful way, basically in your JavaScript, to basically be able to return different style sheets based on the in your JavaScript based on the values of those media queries give you, and basically building the code base around responding to the size of the application. As
Are you, to follow up on that question from Sanjay, so if I'm understanding correctly, is your CSS in your JS, or is that scoped out as a separate file?
Yeah, so the CS is actually integrated into the JavaScript in that application.
So as you continue to build your components, let's say you get to the scale that you want to get to, what could be some possible issues that you would run into as your CSS is in your JS?
Sure. So, depending on the project scope, especially if you had, multiple people working on the problem, you could definitely see issues where you have, very large file sizes or very large files that aren't necessarily scoped to one problem. They have style sheets in the component, as well as, maybe some other logic, as well as the presentation logic. And that could basically lead to, especially if you have designers and engineers working on the same application, running into issues with that.
And then if you were like, okay, now it's really big, what do we do? How would you break it out?
Sure. So the first thing that I would start doing, and one thing that I actually did in that application, was start to break out the JavaScript objects that represent your style sheets into separate files. And also to scope those down to the components, just so that it's broken up and it's easier to see which style sheets in the JavaScript correspond to certain components. But I'd also say that depending on how the application CSS integrates with the logic of the application, certain global style sheets could definitely be moved to separate style sheet files that could be loaded into the application.
Okay, cool. So you said you use WebSocket to have real-time communication. What are some of the other ways you can think of to make a real-time communication app?
Sure. So some of the newer protocols that are like WebRTC and a couple other protocols that can be used. Some other common ways of building real-time applications is using polling in your data fetching to basically poll the server in a certain amount of time to see if there's new requests. The problem with that is that you can actually lead to a very large and increased load on your backend. And part of the idea of using WebSockets is that you can move all those individual requests onto messages on one TCP connection to try to limit that polling.
Okay. How can you scale? Like Vinoj just mentioned, if it just have a lot of traffic, how can you scale the application?
Yeah, so specifically using WebSockets, one of the ways you can scale the application is by implementing asynchronous jobs or asynchronous tasks in the background, basically to move some of the logic from directly from the request response cycle off of the main web server into background jobs, basically to implement the logic of fanning out messages to the correct receivers of those messages, and basically creating an asynchronous architecture to make sure that you're not bogging down any one process to make sure the messages are delivered to the receivers.
Okay. Vinoj?
No, I think that's all I had.
All right, maybe let's move with the feedback. Vinoj, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, it was really cool to hear about the project. I thought there was a good little detail as to what the kind of business problem is, right? And where you see this product could go in the future. So that was cool. And then also just like, hey, I've thought about this problem. I've thought about this problem. thought about this problem. That was good to hear. Something I would look to improve is for a lot of the answers, I heard like, I used this library. I used this library, and it's totally fine because you're just starting, right? Like, so you're just starting to get into understanding all this. So it makes sense, but like, it would be good to know, like, the libraries are a shortcut. What would be the fundamentals, right? And so that was something that like I picked up on. At the same time, though, I understand that, as I said, like, you're just starting in this. So that was
I
me.
appreciate that feedback.
Yeah, I think I would agree with Vinoj, and those are my feedbacks as well. Is that when you use library, that means you're basically utilizing somebody else's work. You would rather focus on what you have accomplished when you are in the interview. The interviewer is more curious about your accomplishment rather than what are some of the libraries that you are using and stuff like that. Having the knowledge about libraries, it's great. But focusing on that in the interview, that can be probably a negative impact on your interview. One other thing that I wanted to add is when you start about your project, keep it short. You know, you for project one, you started with the business problem and then the solution. That was the good start, but then you kept going about the CI/CD and Heroku and all that. Those can be follow-up questions if the interviewer is interested about that project. So that's something that I would do, is give them the short, brief description about the project and let the interviewer ask those questions if the person is interested in that, learning more about that project.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
All right. Thank you, candidate number 3. Vinoj, Sanjay, let's summarize. And we had today 3 candidates. Sanjay missed the first one, but I think you have a grasp of the second and the third one. So if you would have position, would you, I mean, I understand that the first candidate was a C#, primarily engineer. The second was, by the way, Python, right? And but if you would have like the engineering position open in your company, and if you have, let people also know about it, how they can apply to you. But would you go with the first, second, and third candidate?
So I did not have a chance to hear the first one, so I just have.
I'll send you a recording.
I would go with the second one, second candidate, just because that is more in line with what we are doing at my company, and we are more into Python and like we are going into AI ML side.
Mm-hmm. But let's okay. But obviously the third one is pretty new. But if you would have, guys, the opening for junior engineer, would you go with the third one or not? And if not, why? Right?
Sure. I think I would need a little bit more information before I make my decision. To be honest, like I'm a little bit on the fence. That's just me.
So between the 3 candidates, I would also go for candidate 2. And I think the reason for picking candidate 2 would be the candidates seem to have a good grasp of the fundamentals, even if they didn't know how to go further. Like I loved that question from Sanjay, like, how would you make this better, right? If you could just do anything, right? Like, how would you make this better? And she was like, I don't know. That's okay. I don't know is a totally good answer. That's an awesome, actually. I love the answer I don't know, because it just says, cool, we're not gonna like press for further here, right? We're gonna go into another part of the interview, which is super cool. But like, how stoked the candidate got by the amount of learning at that is an indicator to me that they'll continue to be driven by that learning, right? So that's where I went for candidate 2.
Vinoj, for the candidate number 1, what suggestions you would like to give, maybe?
I think it's the same stuff I had said at during that feedback loop, right? Is just like, hey, he presented himself as saying, like, I really want to learn. Like, what are you already doing? I'd love to see what you're currently learning and what you're always constantly improving on yourself. And then how did you bring it back to whatever company you are currently at, right? I'm a believer in, like, you kind of teach yourself, right? In addition to your company helping you, all that stuff, but like that just such a great driver.
Yep. All right. I think that was very interesting session today. We had 3 candidates with different background, actually, and which is very interesting. So, guys, thank you for joining for today's session. Vinoj, Sanjay, you did a tremendous work for giving feedback. I think a lot of people will learn from that. And I want to say additional thank you to Irina. She was handling the processes of our organizing our candidates to our candidates as well. They were brave enough to participate in today's session. You guys did all great job. And yes, guys, if you are interested about Vinoj, Sanjay, please find them on LinkedIn. And same thing with me and Irina. You guys welcome to join to our Slack channel. And I'll see you guys on the next session. I hope Vinoj and Sanjay, I'll see you too. You are always welcome, both of you. No permission required. So just let me know if you want to participate, and guys. And yeah. Thank you very much, guys.
And you know, I'm personally happy to help in any manner I can provide any help, any suggestion in terms of interview preparation. Find me on LinkedIn.
Sanjay, join to our Slack. People will find you there.
That too. Yeah, I will join today for sure.
There you go.
Yeah, because Vinoj was chatting with you there.
I was like, Sanjay, I love your question.
All right, guys. Thank you very much. I know that Vinoj needs to go, and I'll see you next meetup. Follow us on the meetup group on YouTube. Please, whoever is not subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do so. Thank you, and see you next time. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.